So let's move to the next step from the aspiring mind to the abstract mind, which is what we normally call the higher mind in Theosophy. I use the abstract mind because that's kind of the way that you stimulate it, by dwelling on abstract realities. So this is from Besant again. The seat of self-consciousness is moved from the lower mind to the higher, to the abstract mind, by strenuous thinking, by the intellectual travail of the student, the philosopher, the man of science. If the latter, if the philosopher, if the man of science, turn his thoughts from objects to principles, from phenomena to laws. So the abstract mind is still part of the mind, so you still have to use your thought, your thinking. An example of this would be Einstein, for example. He did basically a thought experiment when he discovered the theory of relativity. He did a thought experiment. He started meditating on the nature of space and time, and what happens if a photon of light, if I ride a photon of light, and of course he had the background to understand what he was doing, and he was trying to go to the principles, to the laws, and you can have an insight from the higher mind that tells you how reality is. Now, what kind of insight you get depends on the object of your meditation. He was meditating, let's say, on physical laws. He had an insight about physical laws. If you are meditating on spiritual laws, you will have an insight on spiritual laws, or on the spiritual life, or on something like that. When Patanjali describes the different samadhis, he clearly shows there what kind of samadhi you have depends on the object of your meditation. Therefore, to be able to raise your consciousness to the higher mind, we need to meditate on lofty subjects, which are the objects of the higher mind. The higher mind is the one that perceives what we call abstractions. It perceives that as realities. So if you want to bring the lower mind to the higher, you start contemplating the realities of the higher mind. That for you as the lower mind at the time, they are just concepts. But because all concepts are the shadow of the reality, if you meditate properly on the concepts, you can get to the reality. Now, meditating and thinking strenuously and all that is not about necessarily thinking logically about it. You think trying to perceive the reality of it. So if you meditate on your higher nature, and it is said your higher nature is omnipresent, this doesn't necessarily mean that you start meditating on what omnipresence is and define the word and seeing what, that kind of thinking is superficial. You are thinking, trying to understand and realize how you are omnipresent. And you start from where you are. You say, okay, what does it mean that I'm omnipresent? Obviously, my body is not omnipresent. When in the New Age they say you are gods. Well, what do you mean by that? Normally they think, I, the personality, am a god. But if you meditate on that, well, God is omnipresent. Your personality is not. God is full of love. You as a personality are not. God is, so what the saying, you are a god, is telling you is, you are nothing that you think you are. You are not the body. You are not your emotions that are always changing. God is eternal. You are not your thoughts that are conditioned, that are confused. God is omniscient. So if you meditate on this, you will realize, you will be meditating on your higher nature, and then that will take you to a realization of your higher nature. Now, if you take that saying without proper meditation, it will do the opposite. It will just aggrandize your ego. I am the divine, I am God, and therefore I can bend the universe so that it bends to my desires, and I manifest everything that I want. Because I am divine, it's my right. Well, you are not your desires. You are being desired by the elementals. So you are bending your knee to the elementals. What you are is a divine. You have everything. You are everything. You don't desire to have some things that are irrelevant for you, for your real nature. So thinking carefully, this is what Anibesan means. I mean, there are some meditations that can be purely intellectual, and there are some natures who are attracted by that. She gave an example. You can realize the nature of the threefoldness of the reality, the divine. All gods are presented as threefold, as a trinity. In Hinduism, even the manifestations of the Buddha in Mahayana Buddhism, you have the three kayas, and this threeness of the divine seems to be everywhere. And Besan says you can start meditating on a triangle and on the different triangles and get to the archetype of the triangle. Actually, this is something that Blavatsky taught in the inner group, an inner group that she had. And Besan then she taught this publicly. It's a completely intellectual meditation by which you can go to the archetype of the threeness, and you can have an insight on the divine. But that's better for people who have kind of a mathematical mind. So again, you have to adapt it to yourself. So she says, the habit of quiet, sustained, and sequential thought directed to non-worldly objects. So this again, if you are meditating on something that belongs to your personality, can be very helpful in many ways, but it's not likely going to bring your awareness to your higher nature. It may help you develop self-knowledge. It may help you understand your personality. Oh, that's valuable. But if you want to raise your higher consciousness to the abstract mind, you as a soul don't really care about the personality. Don't really care about the limitations of the personality. You care about the realities. And you care about the personality to the extent that can be a vehicle of expression and learning. So you need to meditate on non-worldly subjects of meditation, of study. All this develops the mind-body, the mental body, and renders the mind better instrument to the higher consciousness. The effort to cultivate abstract thinking raises the lower mind towards the higher. Let me read a few more quotes and then we will discuss it. Expansion of consciousness and development of brain are achieved by the practice of meditation, this is Hodgson, already referred to, and by the art of contemplation or dwelling abstractedly on and in the highest truths of nature. This method consists, first, of fixing the mind upon an aspect of the eternal truth, an attribute of divinity, or your higher consciousness, or something higher. Trained by the exercises in meditation, the mind becomes steady, capable of being fixed upon a single idea to the exclusion of all else. You need to focus your mind. And when the idea chosen is one of the eternal, the consciousness is automatically elevated and expanded by contact with it. Whilst the lower mind is concerned with the attributes which differentiate one object from the other, the lower mind, as we saw, we talked throughout this conference, is always labeling, separating. While the lower mind does that, the abstract mind now begins to group them together by some common attribute which appears in a number of otherwise dissimilar objects, and makes a link between them. In this way, the person evolves the power of recognizing identity amid diversity. So this is the other aspect that stimulates the higher mind. Recognize commonality in the diversity. So one aspect is to meditate on the higher. The other aspect is to recognize the commonalities among the diversity. So in meditation, you can do that. You can, if you want to understand the true nature of anything from the higher mind, you need to understand what is in common. There is a phrase in At the Feet of the Master, focus on the divine life in people, which is what you have in common to them. So if you are having trouble with a person, meditate on that, focus on what is common between the two of you. Start meditating on the two of you as what you really are, that are spiritual entities. Difficulties, conflict, flaws, they all come from the lower bodies. Appreciate the divine nature of that person, which as divine nature is as pure and well-intentioned as yours, and start meditating on that which you have in common. And that will gradually transform your feeling, your relationship with the other person. Or in anything, that as we were talking in this conference, human suffering is something that unites us all, regardless of our ideas or agendas. So if you want to develop compassion, empathy, focus on that which is common. And then, of course, you need to use your discernment to act on the external plane. That you can understand and have compassion for a murderer doesn't mean that you will let that person keep killing other people, because it's not good either for the people or for himself. So being able to understand where people are coming from doesn't mean that you justify actions or let actions happen that may be destructive to themselves too. But there is a huge difference if you try to address a problem from the point of view of your anger or from a place of compassion. You will see that how you deal with the problem is completely different.
Hi. So before, when we were talking about aspiration and devotion and different possibilities of directing our attention, I was thinking that for me personally, the easiest way are cosmic realities. For me, in my meditations, the aspiration and even the devotion is toward the sun. Not only the sun as the source of our life ecologically, but as solar logos, as the source of our system. And on an even higher way is space as the supreme reality. Space, because it's not just an idea, but it's something we are experimenting. It's our experience of space on a different levels. No? But of course, there is a very high level of what we call space. And now I was thinking that meditate on cosmic realities can also be a bridge to what is being said here about abstract laws and principles. I was just trying to bring another possibility, another way.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
That would be perfectly good subjects for the higher mind, for the abstract mind, meditating on the logos. And if, obviously the sun is has always been a big symbol for the logos. Do you like mantras? If you do, you could use the Gayatri. The Gayatri is the invocation to the logos in the sun. Use your imagination, use your creativity. In all this, use your creativity. Hudson sometimes recommended visualize yourself in the center of the sun, in the heart of the logos. Try to unite your consciousness with the consciousness of the logos. That's all the kind of meditation we are talking about, and we have to find what inspires us and then work on that direction. All right, so the last step that we are going to look into is from that abstract mind to the illumined mind. So let's see a few definitions about this, taking this step. So the student passes progressively from concentrated thought to meditation, and from meditation to profound contemplation, in which everything within him seems to stand still. Let us stop there for a second. This is Hudson. So this step is a step in which we go beyond the mind. Therefore, it takes place as a practice. It takes place in the context of a contemplative exercise. Then this state may come to you almost untriggered, or by a trigger that we don't perceive or identify. But as a practice to cultivate this state, it's helpful to do it in the context of a meditative exercise. You can do, there are the meditations in movement, and you can get to, if you are skillful, you can maintain these states in any situation, and that's more or less what you aspire to. But if you try to get there when you are trying to discover this state while your body is moving, it is more difficult. You have to keep your balance, etc. The walking meditation is great for other purposes. But at least in the Theosophical literature, this step is often recommended to be nourished, cultivated in the context of a meditative exercise. And see that Hodgson mentions 3 stages there that are the typical 3 stages in Theosophical meditation: concentration, meditation, contemplation. In concentration, you are working with the concrete mind, and you are trying to focus the concrete mind to gather your thoughts and focus them on your object of meditation, and which will be later contemplation. In the stage of meditation is where you are using your mind to ascend all these different steps. So the meditation is the one that takes you from the aspiring mind, to the abstract mind, and then you get to the point in which you want to go beyond the mind. That step is contemplation. Contemplation is where you leave behind whatever you are doing with your mind, and as we are going to see, you stand still. So all techniques of meditation are used during that particular stage that we are calling meditation here. You may have some preliminary concentration techniques on your breath, on your body, or concentrating on the subject that you are going to meditate on. The difference between concentration and meditation is that in concentration, in that stage, you are still trying to gather your thoughts. Once your thoughts are gathered, and you can do the work without any distraction and without any, you are not, it's like when you are absorbed in something, you are not fighting distraction. You are there, you are fully present there. When you are fully present doing whatever you choose to do in your technique, then that's the stage of meditation. And then at some point, the idea is don't stop there. This stage of meditation is that kind of elevator, let's say, that took you to the abstract mind, and now you have to get out of that elevator, stop that movement, so that you can be receptive for buddhi, for the spiritual wisdom to illumine your consciousness. So this is what Hodgson says there. He then dwells in utter silence upon the very essence of the idea which has been chosen, which at that point is not an idea any longer. If you are successful in this process, you are meditating on some lofty reality, and then you start reproducing that within yourself. And when you enter that atmosphere, when you feel what you were meditating on, then you pause, you drop all mental activity, and you just dwell in the essence of your work, in that feeling, that atmosphere. And you dwell in silence there. And then eventually even that essence falls away, and the soul is left in darkness and alone. Again, if we talk about what Patanjali, and in the vocabulary of Patanjali, he would talk about what he calls samprajñata samadhi. Samadhi means this kind of strong, effortless absorption with your object of meditation in the Hindu context. Again, here in Buddhism, they often use samadhi for concentration, and they use jhana for what Hindus use samadhi. And jhana, I think, I'm not sure, but it comes from dhyana, which is meditation. So you see, if you are familiar with the Buddhist use of these words, and you go and read a Hindu text with those terms, you are not going to understand them, or the other way around. So this is very important if you want clarity in your mind. So anyway, Patanjali talks about Sampranyata Samadhi, which means pranya is consciousness. So it's this fusion, this complete concentration and absorption with consciousness. Sampranyata means with consciousness. And then if you dwell there, even that consciousness, that atmosphere, that feeling falls, and you are left in utter darkness, as he says there, and alone. And that is what Patanjali calls asampranyata samadhi, which is this state of unity without consciousness of an object. It's not that you fall unconscious. It's not that you fall asleep. You are there present, but because there is no object of perception, there is only just awareness of nothingness. Of course, if you are in the right position, you have transcended also the sense of I am meditating, even the silent sense of I am meditating, or I am here contemplating something. So there is only awareness of nothing. There is no object. But the way that seems in consciousness is like that darkness and aloneness. And then that's when the light of Buddhi can come and bring a higher perception. So in that silence, the voice of the divine is heard, and in the darkness, the light eternal shines. Actually, there are two things that may happen. Buddhi may illumine your consciousness, or you may begin to be aware on a higher plane of consciousness and begin to perceive your object of meditation now on a higher plane. But that doesn't matter for our practice. All that matters is to know that at some point we need to dwell in darkness and alone. But at some point, not at the very beginning, at least from this tradition. There are different methods. You don't start with this, you end with this. So Besan puts it this way. You have gradually made the vagrant mind steady by this process of slow and gradual curbing, and at last you are fixed on the central thought, or the central figure, if you are meditating on a divine incarnation or on your higher nature. And there you are poised. Now let even that go. Drop the central thought, the idea, the seed of meditation. Let everything go, but keep the mind in the position gained, the highest point reached, vigorous and alert. He will practice daily the higher powers of the intellect as they unfold. As these become familiar, he will gaze into the darkness beyond the intellect, beyond the abstract mind, seeking by concentrated meditation to find the light that is beyond the darkness, the light of the real, of the self. So you are just aware in that darkness, and you are fine being there. This implies a surrender. This implies a lot of surrender, because at the beginning you will touch that for a little bit, and then your mind will come back with the awareness of yourself. In mystical traditions, like in the cloud of unknowing, the force that takes you there is, for example, love for God, that longing. Now, he says, the author, whoever he was, he says, that love can take you all the way, and you can work with that love all the way up to the point where you are still there. Now, how do you get out of the picture? That's kind of a mystery. That's not something you can do. Because obviously, if you do anything, you are doing it from that center of feeling. You are a special, separate center doing something. So there is the need of surrendering, of ceasing, stopping. And for some people, that can be very scary. If you did this journey gradually, it's not scary at all. It's actually, very comfortable when you can even touch some levels beyond the self, you realize what a burden it is to live life from a center, from a self. It's such a burden. So if you get gradually there, there is no fear. But for some people, there is. But that implies absolute surrender. Cease to be. Die, and you will see that in dying, you are not dead. You are reborn in a higher plane. So cease to be, and you will see that you don't cease to be. You cease to be the limited, but you discover yourself, if we want to put it that way, in the unlimited. In that silence will arise within him the spiritual consciousness, responding to subtle thrillings from an unknown world, first feebly and then more strongly. With a courage ever increasing, he knows himself as spirit. He knows himself divine. Normally, this is a gradual process. Some people had a sudden vision of this. In many cases, that is very disruptive. In many cases, that doesn't last. In many cases, that feeds the ego, like what Kurt was saying when I was talking about this, and that I was saying there is no shadow for this state. While the state is active, I think there are no shadows, but as he pointed out, because this is impermanent, afterwards, that can feed your ego. There was this non-dual teacher, Sean Klein, and he said the ego is like the clowns in a circus. You have some people doing very skillful things, and then when the act is over and everybody's applauding, then the clown comes and receives all the applauses, like he did it. And that's what the ego does. You may experience an aspect higher of yourself, and then the ego say, "Oh, I'm awesome." So that is the shadow of this state. But if this is something sudden, it can be very disruptive. Some people are mature enough to take it in the right way. But for the most part, this happens gradually. And when it happens gradually, it's normally less disruptive. It's normally more stable. It gives time to consciousness to gradually assimilate it. That's why she says, first feebly and then gradually more strongly, and with ever increasing courage, you seek that. Now, how can we, work on this? One object of meditation that you can use for this is the highest object, which is the ultimate reality, what in Hinduism they call Atman or Atma. So this is something that another early Theosophy said. If we want to rise higher, we must produce the necessary conditions. The higher states are more and more ubiquitous, which means they are less limited. They are more and more about interpenetrating everything, about permeating everything, about universal states. So he says, the higher the spiritual state, the less limited it is. Therefore, what we need to do first is to center our mind in those higher and more ubiquitous states. And this can be done by two means, he says. By constantly disassociating ourselves from the lower desires, etc., from the personality. The personality is always telling us, you are here and you are now. But you as a spiritual nature are not here, you are everywhere, and you are not now here, you are every time, you are in the eternal. So part of the practice is to constantly disassociate yourself from the limited aspect of yourself. So that's why in the Blavatsky's diagram of meditation, it's all about that. It's about disassociating yourself from places, from forms, from the idea of separation and meetings. What separates and meet is our bodies. We never get apart from each other. We, in our spiritual nature, are a unity. So we need to start meditating on that. At the beginning, it's just an idea, but as we do meditate on it, it becomes more and more of a reality, a feeling. And then many things like missing somebody or feeling nostalgia or any of that, those feelings disappear because inwardly there is, if not very conscious, but there is a background sense of being everywhere, in touch with everything. So first, by constantly disassociating ourselves from the lower desires, etc., the personality, which chain us to our narrow personality. And the second, by transferring our consciousness to the divine Atma, to the universal aspect of our being. So you can meditate on any of the qualities of Atma, or however you or your tradition postulates this or names this. If you go to the Upanishads or Shankaracharya, the Vivekachudamani, the crown jewel of wisdom is often translated as, there are pages and pages of description of Atman, which are quite boring to read. Atman is indestructible, Atman is this, Atman is okay, get it over with. But if you meditate on that, and you try to realize this is your true nature, you are indestructible. How do you feel knowing you are indestructible? Nothing can hurt you. Of course, things can hurt your body, your emotions, your mind. I'm not talking about that because you are not that. You are that which is indestructible. You are that which cannot be hurt. Imagine for a second that you know you cannot be hurt. How would you go through life? So you are eternal. Imagine for a second you will never die, you will never lose consciousness. You are eternal. How would you experience life if you have that conviction, that experience? So this is what this means. Meditate on these realities. And gradually you start feeling that. You start sensing this is reality.
So it was wonderful the way you structured everything as you showed all the different levels, and really I think it's helping a lot for us to categorize things, to be able to understand things. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering also whether there, in this whole process, there is a kind of place for curiosity and wonder, because I know Leadbeater said in the Master in the Path that curiosity is a vice, basically, which I think on a personal level we can easily understand why this is the case. But when we advance on those different levels, what do you think? What is the place for healthy curiosity and wonder to go forward?
Yeah, no, that's essential. I mean, of course, the way that Leadbeater was talking about, as you say, is that curiosity that keeps the mind always trying to dip a little bit into each thing and mingle or get yourself involved in things that don't apply to you. That is an obstacle. But the curiosity, it's essential in your exploration. All these meditations, this is the difficulty of leading meditations on this. All these meditations are an exploration. You have to be curious. You have to have that question of saying, this is my reality. How come that I don't know this? How come that I'm not aware of this? That is what I really am. I want to see what is beyond my thoughts. So you work on this, not following a mechanical technique. You say, so when my thoughts they stop for a second, do I disappear? I'm still there. So who am I? Who am I when there are no thoughts, emotions, sensations? I look and I say, there is nothing there. Well, but I'm there. So who am I? What is that I in the nothingness? So I think curiosity is essential. I don't know if all minds work that way. It may be my bias, I follow science because of curiosity. I want to discover things and see how they are. But in my experience, it's essential. So thank you for bringing it up. Yeah.
So this is just an offering to the group with respect to the ideas about reading and meditating. Some years ago, I came across the writings of an Indian spiritual teacher, Eknath Eswaran, who seems to be something that many Theosophists have encountered at some point in their lives, and I find his books are in many Theosophical libraries. He did a 3-volume translation and commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, and I spent about 9 months reading just one verse and the commentary every night, just before I went to bed, which was taking up a suggestion that he had made himself, that the last thing that you do before you fall asleep, you take with you into your sleep, and that somehow it works there. And I really found that extremely transformative, and I was doing the Annie-Besant practice of reading small amounts, thinking about it, and then adding to that the falling asleep in that experience. So keep your eyes open for that. It's money well spent and time well spent.
But close your eyes if you want to fall asleep. Keep your eye open for the instructions. Close your eyes to fall asleep. Yeah, I agree. That's great. Also, reciting a mantra and falling asleep, reciting a mantra is also interesting. You can try.
Well, I try to gather my thoughts and not let them flow away, because happens like that very often. So first of all, I want to congratulate you about this presentation. It is very clear, helpful, informative. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, my question certainly has 2 parts. The first part is easy. The second must be a little bit technical. First part is that very good to have this ladder with our mind trying to climb, and then we reach this, the second part of my question. The mind reach a kind of stillness, which in philosophy of Hindu would call it samadhi. You cited Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, very brilliantly commented by Dr. I.K. Temne. We cannot forget this. This will be a kind of student's guide for the whole life. Now at the end, well, not the end, it is one chapter, he developed samadhi. And he explained why he explained it beforehand, before all the rest. And it is quite logical. Now you mentioned the 2 terms of samadhi. The first is samprajñata, and the second is asamprajñata, meaning that with or without cements inside the mind. Very good. So meaning that at moment, the mind has reached the top of the ladder. Yeah? And at the top, something will tell you, jump. Would the mind dare to jump? This is the question that all of students serious should think a little bit about when we study the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali. Now, if there is some jumping out, what happens? My question is it Dharma Mega Samadhi, meaning that you don't come back?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, the way that Taimni puts it, and he's actually taking a clue from Annie-Besant in the book Introduction to Yoga. Annie-Besant sets up certain interpretations that then Taimni develops in the science of yoga. This process repeats itself on several planes. So, we are used in Theosophy to thinking of this kind of fractal universe where you follow a certain procedure and you get to the highest of that, only to discover that then that procedure can be taken over again on a higher plane. So I would say that for the mental plane, when you get to that state, you get to the Dharma Mega Samadhi of the mental plane, but that leads you to the Buddhic plane. And of course, you come back from that. But when you do it at the level of the Atmic plane, that's where you go in Dharmakaya, like what in Tibetan Buddhism they would say, into that vesture, unless you have developed bodhisattva vow or the desire for humanity that keeps you anchored so that you can come back. So I would say this same process can be repeated, or Besan says, this same process can be repeated on the Buddhic plane and then on the Atmic plane. And that's, I think, the one that Patanjali refers to. But that's my speculation, obviously. I know nothing about those very high planes. So, okay.
A question from online.
Then let us take a couple more, and then we can do a meditation to finish.
Does heart coherence meditation align with the things you've been talking about? If we connect to our hearts, generate nourishing emotions for others, the world, ourselves, does this trap us in desire or raise us up?
Mm-hmm. Well, the heart has different meanings. So when somebody says the heart, you don't really know what they mean to. In the esoteric view, or let's say in the Theosophical view, like Blavatsky says, the heart is a symbol for buddhi. When we think of the heart as emotions, the organs connected to emotions, especially with lower emotions, are the stomach and the liver. So if you have a lot of desire for somebody, you can say, I love you from the bottom of my liver. It's not very romantic, but it's more esoterically correct. So if you are talking about the heart as the highest consciousness, then that would not generate attachment.
You spoke about the darkness place, that we get to the place where we're alone in darkness place. And so in a lot of meditation, the focus is on the light. And my experience of being in the dark is that it's not empty, because it sounds kind of scary to think you go to this dark space. And I just wondered if you'd speak a little bit more about that dark space, not dark space.
Yeah. Dark space, you should be scared. And the reason why I say that is because the ego has to cease for that to work. And the ego is the one that is scared. The ego is the one that wants something out of it. Why would I do this? What do I get out of it? Are you meaning that I have to be left behind? So as long as we are operating through the ego, which is a very natural state because to some extent, more or less, we are all operating there, the real darkness that we are talking about here is not going to be available. And that darkness seems fear, terrifying for the lower self. Of course, I'm not talking about darkness of depression or anything like that. But it is very scary for the ego. So if you are trying to go there riding on the back of the ego, it will be scary and you won't be able to cross it. That darkness is like the dweller on the threshold. And the price you have to pay to cross is to leave the ego behind. Now, if you have been growing holistically, gradually, then that darkness is just joy. As I said, I cannot claim to know much about it, just little glimpses. But life, a state of consciousness without the center of consciousness, in this case the ego, you feel you are leaving behind such a burden of having to perceive life from this limited ego that is joyful. With a joy, if you see how Jeffrey Hodgson describes higher consciousness, again, he knows and he experienced far more than I do. And I just, if anything, touch the brims of it. But he always says, higher consciousness is not that bliss. He never describes it as exciting, as exhilarating. That state of consciousness that bliss is rather a profound peace, stable, calm. The joy is very calm, very, it doesn't produce a stirring up of anything. Actually, on your way there, you have to go through a state where a state of bliss comes up. Again, Patanjali talks about these stages. So first the regular thoughts, then the deeper thoughts of the higher mind, then Ananda Samadhi, or Sananda Samadhi, for example, where you feel bliss. And after that, there comes the Asmita Samadhi, which is the Samadhi of the pure I-ness. And if you go through that, you realize how bliss in the sense of pleasure is painful, is disruptive. You don't really want that, because what is behind is far deeper, far more satisfying. Pleasure is a vibration that is disruptive, that can never get to the point of peace. So the ego knows very little of all of this, because the ego lives by pain and pleasure, pursuing pleasure, running away of pain. So I cannot claim to know more than how this works on other people, but what I gather from the literature is that as long as we are going with the ego, that place is forbidden to us. And this is important to know it, because that is the test. When you get to that border, that jump that Kim Ju was talking about, are you willing to leave the ego behind? If you're working in the right way, you are not only willing, you are happy to leave it behind. If you are doing spirituality based on the ego, you will never be able to, I don't say you, I say in general, never be able to cross that barrier. At least that's my very limited.
Is that the ring pass not?
It is a ring pass not. Yeah, absolutely.
What helps is that before you get to that total egoist state, is that you notice how transient the ego is even during normal life. And you notice that more and more.
Absolutely. You are already fed up of the ego. If you are not fed up of your ego in your daily life, then you need more time to be fed up with it. And then, as you say, then that jump is easy and happily embraced. All right. So let us do a brief meditation. We'll take a few minutes. Can we take until 12:15, or that's too much? Okay. So in all these kind of meditations, it's important to keep your body relaxed and in a position where it can be stable, because we need to forget about the body for the time being. So find a comfortable position. It is advised to keep your back straight so that the energies flow properly. If you don't, over time you can develop back pain. Then you can focus briefly on your breath and let it become gradually slower. And perhaps when you breathe out, have a sense of letting go, of dropping thoughts, dropping tensions. Like if you become more and more stable with each cycle of breath. All right, and since we have been dwelling on these subjects, our thoughts and emotions should be quite harmonized, unless I upset you with something. So let us try to contemplate some of the qualities of our true nature. So a typical description of our true nature is that it is not confined to the body or to anybody. Our true nature is omnipresent, infinite, all-embracing. So try to have a sense of expansion, as if you were stretching out your presence with a sense of joy, freedom. You are unlimited. Expand, embrace. Stretch out the field of your consciousness to embrace everything. Another quality is that you are eternal. You are literally older than the mountains, than the planet itself. In your atmic nature, you are the ancient of time. And this is real. This is really you. You are beyond time. The universe comes into being, and when the universe is gone, you remain in your highest nature. So try to have this sense of being in the eternal now. Now is eternity. You are beyond change, beyond evolution. You are. So you are this eternal, omnipresent presence. And this presence is beyond thoughts, which are always changing, coming and going. Your presence is beyond the motion of emotions. Your presence is beyond all sensations of the body. Whatever happens, you are there. You witness that. And you remain when the activity ceases. So position yourself in this silent awareness that remains unchanging immutable, witnessing how thoughts, emotions, sensations come and go. In this state, you are beyond the pursuit of happiness. You are beyond escape from sorrow. Because you are complete. You are perfect. All embracing, eternal, silent presence that is perfect. This is your true state. The problem is that when you operate through the mind, you identify yourself with the movements and distortions of the mind. And you take on yourself the problems that belong to the mind, not to yourself. Same with the emotions. You are perfect. It's your emotions that may have a problem here and there. But that doesn't really touch you. And same with the body. The body has its own needs, its own problems. But the body will be gone, and you are still there. The emotions will be gone, and you are still there. The thinking mind will be gone, and you are still there. Perfect, poised, in profound peace and harmony. Just being. So now try to focus on the feeling, the atmosphere generated. And remain in silence enjoying it. If thoughts come, let them go. Just cling to the insight, to the atmosphere, and just be that in silence. repose, rest, dwell in just being. So we are going to gradually return to an awareness of our mind, emotions, and body. But let's start through the mind. Let this insight into your true nature illumine your mind, so that you retain it to some extent. Let this insight, this experience inspire your emotions, uplift your emotions, so that you retain an emotional memory of your true nature. And let this insight vitalize your body and bring harmony and balance to it, so that it remains aligned with your true nature. And when you are ready, you can open your eyes.